Okay, we're back. Now comes the fun part. We are going to subtract into that tree and use the background color to shape the tree. This is a really fun way to work. So I'm going to pick up my Ben's yellow and some titanium white and a little bit of Quin magenta. Mix this color up. Make sure you have enough titanium white in that because you need to have a color that will block out the blue, that will cover the blue. So let's come in here and shape that tree. I think I'm going to put a little more titanium white in that. It's not covering quite enough. There we go. That's much better. I'm using my number 6. That gives me a really nice point to work with. And you see how I'm just shaping that tree to have some really nice edges and some really nice shapes. You want to make sure you don't have too big a shape. And it's really a fun way to create a shape in your tree or anything else. You could do it with a cactus, you could do it with a flower. We're going to come down here as well. We'll change the color when we do that. But by using a smaller paintbrush and coming back into the painting, we can really make some interesting shapes. Okay, and that pink that we painted down before is a nice background. Gives us a nice solid background to paint on. A little bit more titanium white. Doesn't seem to be covering on this side over here as much as I would like it to. Just keep going around and shaping that tree, taking away any of the great big shapes that don't look organic. Paint right into the blue with your background color, and you get some really nice shapes. Okay, I'm going to make a little bit more of this, and it's going to be a little different in color, obviously, because I'm making it twice. It should be pretty close, but it'll be a little bit off. But that's okay. Doesn't bother me in the least. As a matter of fact, if anything, it gives the painting some more interest if it's not one uniform flat color. See how our tree is shaping up? It's got a much more interesting shape than it did before. Having some nice areas there. Maybe this one's a little bit too round. There we go. Okay. Couple of areas here that don't look like they're covered completely. And you can see my different colors that I'm coming back on top, and it's actually really fine. It just makes it more interesting. So don't worry about trying to mix your colors when you're painting absolutely the same over and over again. It makes your painting more interesting. Gives it a little flavor. Now that is just a tiny bit too light up there, just a tiny bit. So I'll come in with another color on top of it. Little tiny bit of glazing liquid. My paint's getting a little bit dry. You don't want to use too much glazing liquid though, because it can make your paint too transparent. So you don't want to make transparent paint when you're trying to paint over something like this. I think I want to bring just a little bit of that color interior to the interior of the tree. Maybe right about here. And make this shape a little nicer. I'm going to wipe my brush, and we're going to come back and work in this color now. And I think before I do that, I think I might just touch up the trunk just a tiny bit. Give it a little bit of purple there. It needs a little bit of purple in the trunk. Just right here. And maybe here. I think this one's a little bit too light. Let's darken that up. There we go. Okay, I'm going to wash my brush for this one because I'm going to be working in yellows down here. So wash my brush, go back to my yellow. Let's bring it down here. Titanium white. And I don't want it too bright, so I'm gonna put just a smidge of the Quin Magenta into it. And then just a tiny, tiny bit of phthalo blue. I want a kind of a brown yellow, and that phthalo blue is so strong. Look how green it made that. It's so hard to get just the tiniest amount of phthalo blue. It overpowers everything. Okay, that's more what I had in mind. Something a little browner. Let's go just a tiny bit more Quin Magenta. And when I say tiny, I mean barely, barely, barely the tip of my brush. These pigments are so powerful. If you're used to using student grade paint and you start using golden paint, which is what I'm using, it will astound you how strong they are. You need very little paint to get the job done. Okay, let's come in here and block out some of this. Make this a bit of a nicer shape here. That's a little bit better shape. I like that a little bit better. Let's just put a little more titanium white into that. Just feels like it's not covering quite enough. That'll always be the issue when you are doing this kind of overpainting. You're always going to make sure that you have enough titanium white in your mixture, because otherwise it will not cover those dark colors. Okay, there we go. That's more like it. Yeah, that's covering nicely now that I've got enough titanium white into it. Let's come in here. I'm going to shape our tree trunk a little bit. And the lovely thing about this is, as you're working, you can see things that you want to change, things that need to be fixed, and you can overpaint them. It's pretty simple to do. And it makes for a really nice painting too. Okay, I'm going to get a little more yellow here, be a little bit looser now that I don't have to overpaint anything. I'm going to have a little bit more fun with the landscape. Get it a little bit more lively. Lots of fun color. Oops. There we go. Let's do a little bit more touch up. I'm going to touch up this purple hill back there and make it a little more substantial. Give it a little bit more saturation. So you can have a lot of fun with this sort of negative painting idea. And I want this hill to be really different from the tree, so I'm going to make it more red back there. That way it really stands out from the tree, because the tree is quite purpley blue. So let's make this really different. That Quin Magenta is so pretty. There we go. Let's just have that hill peek up over the back of this tree, like so. And I just see a little bit of foliage that I could just put right over that hill. Let's see. Just a little something right there. Made that a little bit too dark. Let's add a little titanium white to it. All right, good enough. And our tree trunk, I want to have our tree trunk come up just a little bit more. Let's have that a little bit lighter. There, that's better for our tree trunk. And then finally, in our landscape, let's do a little something to make that a little more interesting in the foreground here. We're going to have a little bit of a pretend cast shadow. I'm going to take my Quin Magenta, put it right in here where I was working earlier, get a little bit of my phthalo, kind of a dark purple, and we're just going to imagine we've got some cast shadows here. Don't let that scare you too much. Just put that dark in. Let's go a little more on the Quin Magenta side. Just put that dark in. We'll have a little bit between the trees as well. And under it over here. Because these are pretty big trees, they would cast a good sized shadow. Make it nice and dark, and you can see the contrast between that dark and the yellow of the ground really makes for a nice cast shadow. Okay, we're going to carry that all the way up here because, like I said, that is a big tree. And we'll just have a little something sticking out there. There. I think we'll have just a little bit more of that back here. So now we've got the sense that those great big trees have their cast shadows. And they're nice and dark. Okay. Wipe my brush. It's got a little purple on it, so it's going to make a muted yellow. I'm going to pull it down here. And you can see that makes kind of a dark brown. I'm going to bring some of that in here, like so. Vertical strokes, like that. Then I'm going to get a little bit of titanium white and yellow, a little bit lighter. And just come in right on top of that wet paint. Just knock it back a little bit. Gives a little something for that tree to stand in front of. A little bit of my yellow. Come back into that. Don't be afraid to smear the paint around. Don't be afraid to let it blend. It'll do some wonderful things. Just blend a little bit of that yellow on top. And now we have that really nice cast shadow. Just makes that pop right in front of those trees. That is our big, beautiful blue tree in a very colorful landscape. Join me next time for another beginner acrylic painting lesson. And remember what I always say, keep painting.